People are more afraid of getting old than they are of actually dying. And that stuns me because when you think about it, getting old can be a gift. And I started to ask myself, why is this true? And then I realized that people look at the generation ahead of them and they don't like what they see and they aren't sure what to do about it.
Man, isn't that something? Yeah, I want to hang on to that. The generation that you see ahead of you. What is it about that that people fear the most?
I think part of it is we realize that we're looking at our own gene pool sometimes. You look at your parents, your grandparents, and you see the experience that they had getting old. And sometimes it's good, but very often in today's times, it's not. And I think the generations before us went through a time where there wasn't the attention paid to whole living, healthy eating, taking care of yourself. They worked hard. They worked their fingers to the bone, raising their family and making ends meet and rushing through everything. And then they get to 80, 85, and they're just weak. I mean, I talked to a woman the other day who said, my father was an Olympic athlete in the 60s, and now all he does is sit in a chair and watch TV. And that's a snapshot for you.
I think it is a snapshot, and that it's hard because of sometimes it's people are prisoner of the times that they live in, and I think in some of these times, the entire scope of the community, everyone did the same thing.
Yep.
A person who was more conscious of movement, of what they put into their body, that person is a massive outlier in that generation.
Mhm.
And for humans, it's so hard to be the outlier when you're swimming upstream and everyone else is going downstream for
Right.
that. So I want to talk a little bit too about your amazing journey in this and aging, because we were talking about doing this episode, I told you it resonated with me what you wrote, which is
Mhm.
about that you want to reframe aging as a time of acceleration and growth, not as a time of decay.
Right. Well, there are a lot of misconceptions based on what we've observed. We've observed the previous generations not always having almost like a painful time of their old age. And I'm all about healthy longevity. And longevity really is two things. It is how long you live to be 90, let's say. And then the other part of it is, how is the last 5 years or the last 10 years leading up to that? And I am after having that last 5 to 10 years be of quality so that at the very end of your life, you have experienced it all. And then it happens very quickly and you die of natural causes, but no lingering. It's something that you accept and it's peaceful and there's joy there too, as well as sadness. I think that I saw my parents go through that even though they were pretty healthy and lived a long time. So my journey began, I think, back to my childhood. And I can remember I was a little athlete growing up. So I was very active and kind of a tomboy. And I saw Jack LaLanne on TV. And Jack LaLanne was one of those outliers. He was one of those people swimming upstream. And he showed common people, not bodybuilders. It's not the Arnold Schwarzeneggers of that time, just regular people who could be strong by moving their bodies, lifting, doing resistance training, and eating properly. But the real kicker was he had his wife come on and demonstrate how to do tricep dips on a kitchen chair and raise heavy soup cans over her head. And I remember my grandmother going, what in the world is Jack LaLanne doing? And I said, well, yeah, but look at her. She looked amazing. And that just kind of sat in the back of my head and I forgot about it. But in my mid 40s, I had a health crisis. So I had been a real active corporate jockey, as they say, traveling all over the country, doing presentations and motivating people to change in educational software and that whole end of things. And I let my physical fitness go by the wayside because I was young and healthy. I didn't think about the impact of what I was eating or how I was moving. And so I gained a significant amount of weight, but I still felt really good. Like I mean, I was in my 30s and 40s. That's when you get more forgiveness, right? And I went to my doctor for an annual physical. And I hadn't worked out in years. I hadn't eaten right in years. And so it caught up with me. And he just shook his head and he kind of looked at me over his half glasses and said, Janet, you have high blood pressure, high triglycerides, and high, high cholesterol. And you are way too young to be on your way to early heart disease. But here we are. And then he slid a pile of prescriptions across the table to me. That was his solution, as we're all familiar with pharma coming to the rescue. And something in me just screamed out. It was a silent scream in my head, and I knew it was the little girl in me saying, "What are you doing? You can't take these medications. You haven't even given your body a chance." And I listened to that voice, and my doctor knew me well. And so he trusted me when I said, listen, give me 6 months. Please give me 6 months. Let me work on this and I'll come back in 6 months, take the blood tests again. And if I'm still in the red, I'll take your stupid prescription. So obviously my attitude could have been a little more positive, but I was scared, mad, and angry all at once. I had no idea what I was going to do. He said, okay, let's make the appointment right now and you better show up. I'll come looking for you. I know where you live. And so I got out to my car and I just cried. First of all, out of relief and out of realization that I was having an awakening. And I didn't really know what to do. And I talked to one of my bosses about it. And she said, well, I've got a great trainer. Why don't you just sign up? And so I met him and he was wonderful. And he just happened to be a resistance training. That was his orientation. There's many kinds of trainers out there, but his was bodybuilding and resistance training. I loved it. And I really got strong quickly. I have a good constitution, probably wired in me from when I was a little iron kid. And I got stronger and stronger. I went 3 days a week at 5 a.m. because that was when everybody else was sleeping. So I had no barriers to get there. Nobody was discouraging me. And I just did. And so after 6 months, I hadn't changed my eating at all, but I had lost 30 pounds just from exercising. That's how bad and what in bad shape I was. But then I had created a habit. I went back to my doctor. My numbers were fine. I was still a little fluffy, but I was way better as far as my blood draw and stuff was. And so he said, all right, don't quit. And then one day, these 2 women walked into the gym at 5 a.m. when I was there, and they were just a little bit younger than me, but they were ripped. I was like, how can you get to look like that? That's impossible. And then I noticed they were lifting the same weights I was lifting, and they looked like that. That's not acceptable. I didn't understand that at all. So I said to my trainer, why did they look like that and I look like this and we're doing the same thing? And he said, oh, well, they're getting ready for a bodybuilding competition. It's in 5 weeks. So they have to eat strategically. And I said, what does that mean? He goes, oh, it's really hard. You wouldn't like it. Everybody quits. I said, oh, you're putting me in that group? I'm not everybody. Give me the diet or I'm out of here. So I kind of forced him to let me enter into that world. And a year later, I was on stage for my first bodybuilding show and there was no looking back. And I was suddenly 15 years younger. And it was just the most amazing, transformative experience. And it changed my mental capacity, my vision for the future, my way of living my life. So it affected everything just from that one decision.
Love the story. Thank you for sharing that. Now, with that though, one thing I want to also tag on to is when you were writing about this episode was it's not about peak performance when you're
Right.
working with people. I'd love for you to explain that, especially in the context of aging bodies and moving towards a more fit-based lifestyle.
Well, I did have to learn that lesson early on in being a personal fitness trainer for seniors because I came in like a born again bodybuilder. I was,
Born
I
again bodybuilder.
I was proselytizing. You've got to do this. It's going to save. And so I had to rein it in a little bit. Well, I had to come to terms with the fact that not everybody wants to be a bodybuilder, a competitive bodybuilder. You know what? People just want to be stronger. They want to keep their balance. They don't want to lose their balance. They want to feel good in their skin. Like they want to feel like themselves again. And it's not about a bikini body. It's about being able to move and enjoy and be able to travel and play golf and pick up their grandchildren without throwing their back out. So I had to retool my approach. They taught me. Essentially. And so I slowly, it's like turning an aircraft carrier around. It's kind of slow, but it happens eventually. And I began to understand, oh, you know what? My mission. I'm a great example, and people sign up with me because of the way I look, but they don't want to look like that knowing what the cost is. So let's scale it down and find out, what do you want to be able to do when you're 90? What do you not want to give up because you're old? And I think that ties back to what I said at the beginning. I discovered that people are afraid of getting old because they know inside subconsciously they're going to have to give up what gives them joy. Whatever gives you joy in life. And it could be many things. It's as individual as you are. And so what do they not want to give up? Because they want to be able to enjoy it till the very end, until the lights come on. And when I did that, it informed how to train that person. If they love traveling to Italy, there's a lot of cobblestones, there's a lot of stairs that are uneven and they're not ADA compliant. There's a lot of having to pick up your luggage and putting on the overhead rack and all those things you need to be able to do to enjoy so you don't throw out your shoulder or turn your ankle on a cobblestone. And so we trained for that. I trained an 82-year-old woman who wanted to scuba dive in the Great Barrier Reef of Australia. And she'd gotten certified, but she realized she couldn't drag the tanks around on deck. And everybody was having to help her, and she didn't like that. So there's her first little experience of being dependent on others. She said, make me strong so I can do that. She was really determined. So we trained and we got her so that her shoulders were strong again. She had an old tear she was always guarding it. So it was weak, and we got it strong. And it was just this wonderful experience of seeing an elderly person just blossom and be able to go on this trip and go scuba diving, for God's sakes. That's crazy. 82. People are like, are you sure? And I used to say, you need to tell people how old you are because you'll blow them away. She goes, oh, no. Because that generation never wants to tell their age. But when you're that vibrant, why not? It's a taunt. It's a challenge. So I don't know if that answers your question completely, but in working with our elders, I really enjoy finding out what they love, what they're afraid of giving up, and training them for that.
That's beautiful. I mean, you definitely answered it. It's one of the things that I learned pretty early in my training career was it was hard for me too because I was a collegiate track and field athlete and very into high performance, but it came very quickly to me. I was like, oh, most of these people are not looking to do what I'm doing. The overwhelming majority colleagues, a lot of my colleagues listen to this, and our colleagues, most people are not trying to become the fittest thing that they can become. They
Right.
just want to feel better and move better. I think when you learn that, the light turns on very hard. You're like, oh, that's what this is about. And as people age, it becomes so much about that. Like that, when you talked about feeling good in your body, that resonated with me so much because that's a majority of my clients. They just want to feel good in their body. I have a 71-year-old lady that I train who loves hiking, very similar to kind of what you were saying, right? And she was
Mhm.
hiking in Ireland and she got up to the top and she's like, for the first time, I wasn't tired. I didn't feel bad. That's their win,
That's
not not the I lifted the 80-pound dumbbell today.
right.
They don't care about that.
Oh,
That's that's a very different version
mhm.
of fitness that is exclusive to a very, very tiny percentage of people. The problem is a lot of trainers think that's what they're gonna be working
Yeah,
with.
right.
That's not the case,
Yes. It's so funny because there is this sense of, like you said about, oh, I wasn't tired for the first time. I have ladies coming back and I train some men too. And but the women are especially funny because they're thought of in their family as being a little delicate or whatever. And they're like, I got to the top first and I had to wait for everybody else.
Yeah.
It kinda showed up the other members of and their children, their own, grown children were not keeping up. It's
I had
hilarious.
those same stories, and it's almost they're like you said, they're like almost taunting their children, like, "You're so much younger than me. I shouldn't be in better condition than you,"
Right,
type of thing. But it's a point of really like they encouragement for them, and we're training for life and
right,
and it sounds weird to say, but we're almost training people for the end of their lives as well. And what is that going to be like? Because I think you're right. A colleague of mine, Debbie Bellinger, uh, she works with a lot of people who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and she's like, and these are different women, especially. They've seen their mothers and their fathers, and they say to themselves, "That's not going to be me."
right,
And more people who are aging and seeing things change, they're shifting this paradigm. They're no longer accepting this fall apart mentality. That's what I call it. People this accept. My grandmother was like that. She was like, "You just get old and you just fall apart." And I remember telling her I was like 25. I was like, "No, that's definitely not. That doesn't have to be that way." Because I remember when I was taking a hormone and a metabolism class in college. And I remember we were talking about functional capacity, and there was all these studies about how a 50-year-old could have the same functional capacity as a 25-year-old. And I had never heard that before, but it gave me hope. And I just thought my grandmother just doesn't know about this. She just knows about her time, and no one in her time even gave her hope for this possibility.
Yeah, things have changed over the last 25 years in that we have a lot more evidence of if you put the effort in and you're doing it correctly, you can experience a completely different experience as we age. And, also there's a lot of studies coming out that talk about the heart attack that happens at 60 started at 30. The Alzheimer's that comes on at 70 came on at started at 25. We know now that neurodegenerative diseases don't just come out of anywhere. They're a long, especially if it's the type of Alzheimer's that comes on later in age. There is the genetic one that happens younger, like in their 40s. There are cases of that. It's one of those rare genetic things that is wired. But for everyone else that happens later, those different end of life diseases of heart disease, diabetes, and then neurodegenerative diseases, and all of those things that happen over time because of lifestyle. Can What we want to do is put it off as long as possible, so that if it's going to happen, it happens like within the last few years of your life. Because if you get it at 50 and then you recover, you survive. Cancer, that was the other one. If you survive and we have good techniques, you can live a pretty long time, but you're always having to stay ahead of that boulder like Indiana Jones, with the boulder chasing him, you're always having to look over your shoulder. But if you can put it off as long kick the can down the road and not get it as early, then you're going to have a better experience. And you have to start as soon as possible, because the older you get, the shorter the runway.
That's exactly right. I was just having this conversation actually about that. It's like, no, it's good to start later,
Mhm.
better to start earlier.
Yes,
There's
that's
obviously
exactly
lots of benefit still, tremendous benefit, but you're never going to have the complete benefit that you would have from starting earlier. And what you're talking about too is the window of morbidity,
mhm,
where that last 20, 30 years of life on average for most people is pretty painful
yeah,
for them. It's the very low quality of life.
mhm,
You may end up living a decent amount of time, but there's not a lot of quality to
right,
that. And I think that's what, to your point, people see that in their parents and they go, "Man, I don't want that." And
right,
it's you have to be very intentional about it. But I love that more people are just saying no. They're like it's a rebellion against not against aging per se, but just like this type of aging that's occurring. That is
right.
generally pretty preventable for most people.
Well, and I think because we don't know sometimes what our genetics have for us, we have to understand that genetics is a very small, um, percentage of probability. It's in there, but if you do other things around it that keep it at bay as long as possible, you really can put it off. I mean, I don't know, if your audience is familiar with Dr. Peter Attia,
Mhm.
but yeah, he was a thoracic surgeon and heart and so on until he got to be around 50, and all of a sudden, he got that feeling of, "Oh, mortality." He had a child, and he was now at 50 and started thinking about this, and he started studying it. Now he's full on into it, and he basically talks about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Yeah.
You have to stay away as long as possible. We will die of one of those 4 things as natural causes at 95 or 100. So if that's the case of, cancer, diabetes, neurodegenerative, or heart disease, but put it off as long as possible, because then you don't just lie there in a rest home and be and have everybody waiting on you. That
Yeah.
thing you said earlier about, society's kind of society's directive about aging is definitely behind the times, because I call it, the status quo of what society says aging is. And I'm here, and I think you are too, to rewrite the rules of aging.
Mm, I love that, rewriting the rules of aging because it's well, think about it this way too, like, I experienced this and maybe, our colleagues probably experience this too if they're working with people in their 50s, 60s, 70s. We have regular access to people who look absolutely amazing at these ages. They're defying the past where, you always say someone says, "Oh, 40 is the new 30" or whatever like that. No, for real. For a lot of these people, I have several men I work with who are about to be 60. I mean, they look incredible.
Yeah,
They've been with me, working with me for well over a decade. They take their health and wellness seriously. They don't look like their gap between other 58, 59-year-olds is so gigantic.
yeah,
And I think you're seeing the chasm grow. The
right.
people who take it seriously, and this isn't peak performance either. Like we're talking about, this isn't like take it serious, like, hey, we got to do everything, maximize. No, 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 no. Just are regularly do very positive steps, have incredible vitality, youthfulness as they age. They are defying the old rules of
Yes,
that. And
yes.
that makes me so happy.
I call that the class reunion effect. If you ever see a group picture of, seniors after their graduation, and they're young and they're full of hope and ready to launch out into the world, and then they come back for the 40 or 50-year reunion, and they get in chairs on risers, and they're all, here we are. And they started out all looking alike as far as their youthful vitality and their relative health, right? They don't look that way in the second picture. They say, "That person eats right, that person trains, these people, mm-mm."
Yeah.
It's like you said, the dividing line
Yeah. If
goes
it's a
out.
graph, it's going in different directions.
Yeah.
And, it's easy to tell, right, when someone doesn't sleep very well, if
Right.
they have a really hard life, they're really stressed out. You wear it. Well, you wear it on your face, your body, your existence, your feelings for that. And so, if you can start moving towards
Mhm.
taking the steps towards really being more intentional about your health and wellness, and the benefits are unbelievable. And I always tell my clients this service gets more valuable the older you get.
Yeah.
More valuable. The 20-something-year-olds, they take it for granted. They take it for granted. The 60-year-olds, this is their life. They're like, I
Yeah.
need this. I will show up regularly
Yeah.
because this is a different time in life and I need to move regularly. I'm not trying to be so and so, and it's just actually more rewarding. I've noticed that working with my 60-plus-year-olds have been the most rewarding thing for me.
Well, they have a stake in it because they know that that left alone, they won't do it. They'll slack or skip days or whatever, and if they've got you waiting for them, you have an appointment, they're gonna show up, and then, of course, they love it, but there's always those life, little interrupters that come along and make, "Oh, I'll just take it easy today, and I won't go," but
Yeah.
they don't do that if they have a trainer waiting and
Yeah.
they've paid and they're dedicated and they're going to do it. Yeah, it's really fun. You're right, and they do talk, don't your clients talk about how, like, for Thanksgiving, just this last weekend, where they had great food, but they didn't feel guilty
Yeah.
because they know they're going to exercise, and they'll actually pumpkin pie is the best pre-workout there is.
And I love this idea like acceleration that you talked about. That's part of the reframing is accelerating, not decaying. And you have to
Yes.
think about it too, especially if you're working on yourself and you're really investing on all aspects of being well. You're probably the smartest you've ever been at that point in your life.
Mhm.
So imagine you combine having a lot of wisdom, having a lot of smarts, and you take care of your body. You're the best you've ever been in your life. You're accelerating. You're not decelerating.
Unstoppable. And it does do a lot for brain health when you have your body in fit condition. It makes you think better, gives you more positive outlook because you're doing something positive for yourself. I always ask this question of my clients sometime in the continuum of working together to ask themselves, how am I being complicit in creating the conditions I say I don't want? How am I being complicit in creating the condition I say I don't want? So you want to be healthier, you want to be, so why are you allowing it to not happen? It's kind of an opposite way of asking that question.
Right. And it's looking within, looking back in the mirror at oneself and
Mhm.
saying, well, how am I contributing to
Yeah.
this? It's very
Right.
easy to pawn that off on other external factors,
Yeah.
but looking inside is really difficult because then it becomes, well, maybe I'm part of the reason for that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Meeting yourself is
that's a
hard.
hard one. Yeah, it's like, "Oh, it's me." Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So I think it's like one big takeaway, I think, really is there's a huge amount of value to seeing aging as a time of growth. I think you mentioned this too. This is a time of significant growth
Mhm.
as you enter a different uh, part of your life. And other one, in a previous episode before this was I had Peter Moore on. He was the editor of Men's Health for 20 years.
Huh?
And his whole question was, what type of old guy do you want to be?
That's a
You
good
know, right? And whatever it is, doesn't have to be an old guy, old person. What
Sure.
type of person do you want to be in the future?
Mhm.
And I think that's hard for people because we struggle to see ourselves as older humans.
Yes. That's part of that fear of getting old
Yeah.
or yeah. There is a sense of as you get older, you start thinking about it more. You don't just think about it at that point. The longer you think about it and don't do anything, the harder it is. And I think finding a coach or a trainer who is really clued in like you are and like me, where you really see that. You see the difference in the type of person you're training, what they really want. And I always tell people, if they're just out there where they're not living locally where I live and they can't train with me. If they're trying to pick a really good trainer, go to their gym and get on the treadmill, walk slow and watch the floor and watch the trainers. Which ones have their phone put away?
That's right.
Ones are spotting and paying close attention and talking about what's going on. Which ones have that connection? Those are the ones that are going to keep you safe, not let you do something that's going to hurt you. Pay attention to your progress and keep you challenged, and you'll be great.
That's great advice. I mean, it's such great advice. And this is to me, such a unique topic because I think of the fact that in the United States, I think we have a real problem in the sense that we don't respect people who have aged to their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s as much as we should. And we look upon people in that age group as frail, as unimportant, as not contributing. And I always had the very opposite idea about it. These people have so much wisdom. They have lived in different time periods and eras that are different than mine. They can contribute to my well-being and growth as a human being. And if approached and just taking that approach towards being well could actually be the best version of themselves at that point in their life. Like, that's what I think. I'm like, I'm 46 and I feel like the best is yet to come for me.
For sure.
But that's not the prevailing wind.
No.
Right? So we got to change that narrative.
Yes, I think it's beginning. I think it is. And it's also just that idea that, well, you are being an inspiration by the fact that you live what you teach and you teach what you live. So you're the real deal, and that authenticity really comes through. I believe that one of the things too is being able to understand that when you're older, and you described all those attributes so well of having perspective and patience. And I've been through hard times before and I was fine. I can get through this. Because every once in a while, a client will have maybe a sprained wrist from hiking or, from stumbling or whatever, or they just some minor injury and they're just like, oh, I'm so mad at myself. And you're like, no, listen, you have been through stuff before and you have perspective and you have patience. And all this it's a setback, and a setback is a setup for a comeback. And you have what it takes. Whereas a young person, I mean, like I see somebody have a tantrum on the football field. It's like, no, if you're 70, you're not going to do that because you'd have to save your energy for getting better. You're going to be just fine because you have all the attributes that you need to get through this much more well-equipped than 30 years ago.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
It's just really it can be a very beautiful adventure if we allow ourselves to not be chained by these past ideas about aging. I mean, I see the proof constantly. And I think that's part of why this really stuck to me is I think, one, we got to rewrite how aging is, but two, as fitness professionals, we need to stop putting peak performance onto people all the time. It's not really what people want.
No,
they're not looking for that. We have to stop this. It's too, and I think it's easy to feel that when you enjoy that, or that's been part of your life, but you don't realize you're the outlier. You don't realize your own space on the planet. You are part of a very small percentage of people that want that. Majority of your people you work with do not want that. In fact, want zero to do with it. Zero. So we have to think differently as fitness professionals about what our clients actually want and then respecting that space of what they want. And
it's so cool to connect with you on that because you've experienced it as well as an athlete about high endurance performance and such. And then you're like, oh, I guess we're not going to do that, but we can do this. So it's like, oh, you mean you don't want to, go to the Olympia and be on stage?
No. No, I mean, they're trying their hardest just to make it there to
I
the
know
end
it's
of the session.
that. That was big awakening for me because I think I was just so fired up in the beginning, and I thought, "This is the answer. I've got it." And I was like, "Oh, no, no, there's this other component of listening to what do people really want?" And I'm here to tell, I know you're did you say 45?
46, yeah,
46. So, for your listeners, I'm in a little more than a year, I'm going to be 70.
amazing.
And that is the reason for that is because of this whole experience, this whole story that you're talking about, that I'm talking about, of just taking control of your choices, make good choices now, make your future self happy.
Mm,
So that means being a little more disciplined and making a decision and dedicating yourself to it. It pays off.
yeah, it really does. I just love this. This like when you wrote to me about this, I was all in from the second. I said, "Oh, this is something I experience in my work, but I
Mhm.
don't think it's something we talk about enough." And I always have very long-term clients, and a lot of I see them when they're younger, now they're older. Many of them are crossing that threshold into their 60s, and I love telling them, "Watch the gap widen. It's gonna widen." As I'm not trying to be mean, I'm just like, you
Right,
are literally entering when you're in your 40s, 30s, you're kinda like
right.
a lot of other people. Honestly, you're kinda like even the people who are not doing much as it's not that huge of a difference. But when you get up there and you get older, the gap widens big.
Yeah.
And you're gonna be so thankful that you took care of yourself early to now, and you're unfortunately gonna experience a lot of other people in your life entering into some really dark times
Mhm. Yeah.
because of they decided, "Oh, this is not what's," or they just didn't do anything. I said,
Right,
"But you're
right.
gonna thrive. Watch what happens to you.
Yeah.
You're gonna be amazing. You are amazing."
Are amazing, and it's just gonna get better. I think of it as like a classic car. You know, you're driving along on the freeway, and here in the slow lane is this dude with a '56 T-Bird, and it is perfect. It's like the robin's egg blue and the white trim and the white wall tires and the chrome's all polished, and it's just he's not speeding. No, he's just driving.
Mhm.
He's enjoying that beautiful car, and that it might have been a little bit dilapidated when he bought it, and he restored it. And, that is a labor of love
Yeah.
to take a classic car and make it beautiful again. So I would like our 60 and overs to think of themselves as a labor of love.
Mm.
Remake yourself over again and be that shiny classic car that's driving down the freeway.
What a beautiful sentiment, Janet. I mean, I really resonate with you, and I really respect the fact that you went into something and had a certain idea and then changed that idea. That's hard to do, especially for something that you enjoyed doing and you're
Mhm.
thinking, "I'm gonna evangelize this," right? But there's a cost to that
Yeah,
when it doesn't serve a lot of other people. I feel
right.
like you felt that and you were like, "No, like you said, I'm gonna a big plane takes a while to turn." Right?
Yeah.
It's just math and physics, it takes a while.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
fact that you figured out, you should be commended for that because in our profession, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes
yeah,
someone gets in the bodybuilding and they just force that on everyone, no matter what. And
yeah,
then they wonder why they don't have clients or they struggle.
right.
Like
Yeah,
you have to understand this is bigger than your own desires and passions.
right, right. Well, it goes back to I think I was a classroom teacher for over a decade in my first career, and I learned a very valuable lesson from a seasoned teacher who said, "When you start out with your class, you have to start with where they are and take them forward from there. You can't just go, 'Here's the stuff, learn it.'" You have to say, "Okay, where did we leave off last year and where are you now? Okay, let's start with that, and then we'll go forward from there." And I think it plays off of that idea of take your clients and start where they are, and then find out what they love and what they want, and then build toward that. It's easy. I mean,
It's
we
true.
make ourselves hard on ourselves, and then the answer's staring at us in the face, you know?
That's so we are vibing. We're on the same thing. One of the I used to run a club for like 10 years, and one of the trainers I hired, he was 19 when I hired him. Great guy. He now lives right next door to me here in Colorado. This was when we were in Vegas. And early on in his training career, I said, you're trying to be very too technical with all these folks, and you're trying to like maximize their performance. I'm telling you, they don't want that. Most of these, and all he's been a trainer now he's 31 now, and he goes, "You were right, man." He was like, I just want them to show up regularly. We move their bodies, make them feel good, talk some trash, here's some to
Yeah.
have a good time. He's like, it's simple. I was like, it is simple. I said, but the training professional tries to show off the arsenal all the time and do all this. Let me tell you all this stuff. I'm going to change your life. I'm like, yes, I could change your life, but in a different way than you think it's
Yeah,
going to be
right.
changed.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, it is interesting. I think, it does come from a good teaching instinct, and some people just have it, and I think others have, maybe have to work a little bit to nurture that.
Yeah, most definitely. Well,
Yeah.
Janet, what a pleasure. I'm so
Thank
glad we
you.
met each other. I really
Same
am.
here. I'm so happy that we connected and that you reached out, and I could tell right away from the way that you communicated with me that we would hit it off and really have an understanding, and it
Yeah,
feels good.
we certainly do. Thank you so much for giving me some of your time, which is probably the most valuable thing for so many people. As we talk about time and aging, right? You're giving
Yes.
me some of that time. That's the currency I value so much. I would love for other people. We'll put in the show notes links and all that stuff. But if you have anything you want people to know about you or where to find you, please go forward and say that.
Sure. Probably the best way to reach me is just my email, which would be janet.mcconnell, all lowercase, janet.mcconnell@gmail.com. And yeah, I have a book. I don't know if you want me to talk
Yeah,
about
go
that.
for it.
It might be backwards to you, but it's Elements of Aging Well, My Journey So Far. So if you just go onto Amazon and write in Elements of Aging Well, you'll see the book. And it's written for 55 and older, and mostly targeted for women, although the message and the information also works for men. I had to kind of narrow my focus when I wrote it to make sure that I really, you know, answered the things that I knew they were asking, about getting older and what to do. And so that was a fun project. And I really enjoyed my conversation with you, Darian. You're a gem, and I it's so great to find somebody who is like-minded in this whole large world of fitness.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure this won't be the last time we speak. So
Sounds
thank you,
good.
Janet. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.